when anxiety creeps up or creeps in, recognizing that we're feeling a threat from something or somewhere, we're feeling unsafe or unsecure, and through awareness, try to create a place where we can continue to be in charge of our decisions and actions and be
Yeah.
proactive and not reactive. Here we are.
Welcome
Welcome
back.
to Whoa, my turn. All right, let's dig in. My name is Brandon Chasteen. Welcome to Money Therapy and our co-host of the evening.
It is Bill McGill.
And we're excited to have you here. Um, we were talking in show prep about like what to talk about directly, and something that's really been kind of stuck in my head recently is a conversation that I had with a client. Um, by all measures, this client makes good money. They have a pretty great income. Emergency room doctor, and he is in his like mid 40s at this point. Um, yeah, I wouldn't call it mid, like early 40s. Has a couple kids at home, has a wife, has kind of living the American dream. You would think by all accounts, and should feel really good about where he's at and what he does. Um, in the conversation though, he is just like, Brandon, I really thought at this point, at this stage, I would feel better about my circumstance, about my situation. And he just kind of said, even though I'm making the money now, I'm stuck feeling like I'm behind the the curve, like behind the curve here. Like I'm I'm not caught up to where I should be. And
Sure.
it just jumped out. Like he is dealing with financial anxiety. And my immediate question, not to him, just in my head, was we need we need to find out, like, where did this start? When did this start for him? How long has he been living with this? And then how do we undo it? Right. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Is undoing financial anxiety, and how we might make that happen. And Bill, I want to get to you. I want to hear your thoughts in just a second. But I really think this episode is for like three different types of people. Right. Uh,
Okay.
person number one, and you can pick who you identify with, or maybe you're listening so you don't identify with any. And if you don't, like, reach out to me and let me know who you are, because I would love to like understand if there's more people that do have financial anxiety, um, but maybe you don't fit into one of these three categories. So category number one is the type of person where you're just like, I don't have enough. Like, I'm constantly struggling to pay the bills. Like, I'm constantly struggling to make enough money to make ends meet, and I'm living as thin as possible, right? Like, I'm living as cheap as I possibly can. Um,
Sure.
and so that's kind of people like the person number one. Person number two is their income is growing, or they're making money, the money that they've been excited to make, and money's moving in the right direction, but they are feeling like they haven't caught up to where they should be. The phrase that I constantly hear is, I know I should be further ahead of where I'm at.
Yeah, I've heard
Um,
that all the time too.
and then there's the third person who, one of two things have happened to them. They either have had a massive windfall, like an inheritance, they sold a business, um, they have like a contract negotiation, and they get a huge, like, upfront payment or something like that. But they've made a substantial sum of money immediate, like very quickly, or
Yeah.
they've really worked extremely hard, and um, they kind of feel really confident about where they're at, and they know they have like enough, but they also know they don't have enough to mess it up, and they're kind of just like in this space of, if I make one mistake here, I've derailed everything all the progress I've made is gone. Um, so those are typically the people that we interact with. And of those 3 people, all 3, the golden thread through all 3 is that they do have anxiety. They have anxiety because they can't make ends meet. They have anxiety because they feel behind where they should be, that they're behind where they should be, or they feel anxiety because they feel like they can't have one single misstep in life. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think kind of money anxiety, as far as how we view it and how we deal with it with clients and things, I think it comes out in a lot of different interesting ways. It does come out in personality types. Like you said, some people, think that they're well behind, and they'll always be behind, and they'll never be able to catch up. Or some people think that, um, some people have kind of that aura of confidence around them. I've been there, done that. I know my capabilities around money. Um, and sometimes it makes me wonder, if it's all about money, and it's almost never about one thing. There's usually a lot of things going on in somebody's life. And so what's interesting about that is just all the different client faces that kind of come into my mind. When you were just talking there, it's like, yeah, this manifests itself in a lot of different ways.
I This particular client, that was his big thing was like, I just, I've felt my entire life that as soon as I started making this amount of money, I would be set.
Yeah.
Um, my response to him was, this goes back to my experience when I was in the army and I would go on deployments. Um, what you learn about your body is that, we all have, it's very like scientific, this thing that we experience called fight or flight, right? Like when we feel like we're not 100% safe, our
Yeah.
body starts to do things to keep us as safe as possible.
Hmm.
You know, like if you feel like you're unsafe, your heart rate might start getting elevated, and that's supposed to be so your blood's moving faster, oxygenated blood's moving around to help you move quickly if you have to, right?
Yeah.
All this stuff, there's purpose behind the symptoms of anxiety. And the thing about when I was in combat, we would be deployed sometimes 6, sometimes 9, sometimes like 15 to 18 months. Like some of them were very long. Um, your body gets so used to living in this state of like high high level of being on guard,
Sure.
um, and that it's the symptoms that anxiety produce become almost like a normal rhythm for your body, right?
Yeah,
The
it becomes like your new steady state, if you will.
Right. And so the thing about all of that is like when I would come home, we had to get really, really intentional of like undoing that and getting back to where, normal heart rate was in the 60s, right? Like normal heart rate, normal blood pressure would come back down.
Not
Uh,
120 and
right.
150
Like
or
my,
130. Yeah.
I don't have to notice every single person walking in a door. I don't have to like check the sides of a highway for, trash that could be a disguising an improvised explosive device, right? Like these
Sure.
things, like once you're back into a better environment, it is hard work to unlearn everything that our body, and like here's the wild part is there's something very, very unique about like when we're born, um, what what can happen inside of a mother's body while she's carrying a baby and how that can actually influence a lot of the chemistry of the baby. So the point that I'm trying to drive home is like if you have been anxious for a really, really long time, I'm telling you right now that there is not a single amount of money that will cure anxiety. There's
Yeah.
not a single dollar amount. And some of us, some people have been dealing with financial anxiety since before they were born,
Yeah.
right? Like some of us have like these generational views on money that have been taught to us from our parents and our grandparents, but also just some of that chemistry we were born with because our parents lived in a certain circumstance before we were even alive. And
Yeah.
so what now we have a an emergency room doctor who has, again, by any measure, a very, very good livable income, still
Mhm.
feeling anxious. And that's what I asked him. I was like, when did this start for you? And he was like, well, what do you mean? I was like, well, when did you start feeling anxious about money? Like, tell me about your, tell me where you're from. Tell me about your
Yeah.
parents. Um, and so my challenge in this is like, if you want if you want to eliminate financial anxiety, I don't know that eliminating financial anxiety is possible. What I do think we can get
Or a good
really
thing.
good or what I think we can do is get really good at managing our financial anxiety,
Yeah.
um, get really aware of where our anxiety is coming from in such a way that when anxiety creeps up or creeps in, recognizing that we're feeling a threat from something or somewhere, we're feeling unsafe or unsecure, and through awareness, try to create a place where we can continue to be in charge of our decisions and actions and be
Yeah.
proactive and not reactive. Um, Now, if you have a high amount of financial anxiety or just anxiety, like I do think it's very healthy to try our best to reduce as much of that as possible. But that
Sure.
really comes through awareness. So,
Yeah, I think self-awareness is, such a huge part of that. And what I try, I'll give you a story of one of my clients that just popped in my head, and then I'll tell you a little bit about me and how I curb my own, financial anxiety, and how everyone's different. The client that is in mind has a very opinionated brother-in-law, and he is looking out for his family and wants the best for her, and everything, but he just doesn't know a heck of a lot about personal finance. And based on the stories that she's told me, he's giving her lots and lots of advice, and then he's making financial decisions that she's observed and relayed back to me. And let's just say they're not great financial decisions. So, but how this ties in is, I get a call from her one day, and she's asking about, well, we're my different her different streams of income, like what it's going to be, and how much it's going to be, and where it's all going to come from. Because she's nearing retirement age, and this is a conversation we've had a lot, especially in the coming years. We're getting ready for it, and I said, well, we've talked about, stream A, stream B, stream C, and they come from three different places, and here's how much it's going to be. You've told me your expenses are this, I kind of go into it, and I really drill down to, like, where's this phone call coming from? Because we just talked like a month ago and you seem great. And today you seem very, very worried to me. And well, my brother in law, told me X, Y, and Z, and told me that you were doing everything wrong and I was doing everything wrong. And, um, not bashing me, but like, hey, you got to make sure he's doing this because,
oh, he's
like,
bashing you.
yeah, well, in his own way, probably. Yeah. But it's okay. I can handle it. So, but anyway, so I just asked her, I said, okay, so this has obviously been worrying you and causing you much stress. She's like, oh, yeah, I've lost sleep. I'm like, when did you have this conversation with your brother in law? She goes, oh, like 3 weeks ago. I was like, call me. Like,
Yeah.
the next time you talk to your brother in law, call me. And because, I explained to her obviously why his advice was not even relevant to almost anybody, to be honest with you. Um, but was able to calm her down, talk her off the ledge. And so she thanked me after that. And she's like, I always feel better after I talk to you. And she's given me that compliment before. And so, in her own way, and I have a feeling that this helps a lot of people, which is why financial advising is such a big industry, is it's nice to have that coach in your corner. It relieves anxiety to maybe go to somebody and say, "Hey, am I doing everything right? That we can possibly do, right? Am I doing everything right?" So, that's just one thing that popped in my head on how to kind of curb that anxiety level.
Mm.
The other thing is, as far as the self awareness thing goes, try and pay attention to when you're doing something that you know is good in terms of it helps your anxiety in this area. So for me, um, I get out an old fashioned pen and paper. And if I'm ever kind of stressed about, the bills for the month or where the money's coming from, I like to write it all out. And when I'm done, I honestly I look at it, I think it's, okay, all this math looks right. I think this is correct. I usually just ball up and throw it in the trash afterwards. And I'll do that probably once or twice a month as the month goes on and check in on myself, kind of a budget of some sorts. But really, it is to get it out of my head and get it onto paper. And that's what helps me. Helps me, you've talked about, Brandon, you've talked about journaling a lot on this podcast and how much, the thought journal and the goals journal, you have a lot of different journals for a lot of different things that really help you. Um, and that's great. And so I would just tell our listeners, try a couple of different things. If it's stressing you up out here, maybe it's good to get it on paper. Maybe it's good to call a buddy. Maybe it's good to call your financial advisor when it comes to money. But it all comes back to, maybe it's not a money problem. Maybe, like you said, maybe it's something that you didn't have any control over when you were a kid or an infant. But that doesn't mean that you can't get better with it and you can't be a happier person or a less anxious person with money, with time and a little, self-awareness.
I love the fact that you brought up journaling.
I thought you
Um,
would.
and just to be clear, there are I do actually have a few different journals, but I don't have a lot. Actually, like I have a journal. This
Okay, I shouldn't have
like
said it that way. I'm sorry.
no, no, I do because I think that's I listen to the podcast, and
Yeah.
sometimes I'm like, it sounds like I have a lot of journals. Never really thought that there. I thought like maybe it was just me being a little self conscious about things I say, but
I have 10
I
journals.
listen. I want to challenge everyone. All right,
Oh, throwing down the gauntlet. Let's go.
I carry this thing around with me everywhere, everywhere, and to the
Every
point where, and I say that I'm about to say that I did not take it. I forgot it on my desk today when I went to a meeting. And I felt so insecure in that meeting because I did not have a pen and paper. Now I do have my phone. I can take notes on my phone, but it is not the same in our brain
is not.
as to when we can write things down. And honestly, I felt so weird that when I walked into this meeting with this guy, I apologized to him for not bringing pen and paper to sit down with him. And I asked him, I promise you, you will hardly ever see me unless I forget. And I do make mistakes, but I was like, can I borrow a piece of paper and a pen? And I did. And when I came back to my office, I immediately transcribed that into my notebook. I just dropped the pen. That, but the key
Let's
here, the
go.
thing is like I do have a couple. I have a quotes notebook. I have a good idea notebook. Um, I have a things millionaires have told me notebook, and
That would be a cool notebook to go over one of these podcast days. We
I
should
do.
just go
It
over
is.
millionaire quotes. That'd
It's
be
it's
great.
it's pretty. You know what the most common quote is, which speaks to what person number two in this scenario, like in this thing. The most common, and I say common, the most consistent quote. Me speaking to a whole bunch of different millionaires, multimillionaires that have never met each other necessarily, but I
Yeah.
always ask them like, "What's one piece of advice you want me to write down in my notebook?"
Yeah.
And they always look like the most consistent one I've heard it. If I've heard 100 of them, this has been like 30 times, like 3% or 30%. Um, has been Brandon, you're never behind. You're always going to feel behind and you're never behind. So
Okay. I,
if you're
I
person
wasn't
number
expecting
two,
that.
if you're person number two, I want to talk some to you. So if you journal, this is something that I would encourage how I would journal in dealing with some of the anxious feelings. Two different things I would journal. First of all,
Okay.
if you're not reflecting on your day every day, right? Like I end
Mhm.
every day by opening up. So like today is the February 1st, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So So I have my day each some days are like 2 or 3 pages, but each day gets its own page. Each new day gets a new page. That's
Mhm.
poetic, isn't it? It probably means something on a deeper level there. Um, but at the end of every day, I do open this up and I just look at my day and I ask myself, was it a good day or a bad day? Right. Um, so that's one thing. But in that, two different things.
It
If
just
I'm if I
reminded me of something I want to talk about in a second.
hold the thought, if I
Yeah.
have an anxious thought, to your point, get it out of your head, get it onto the paper, and just write down the thought. Make a quick like and these the thing is like when people journal, like I don't journal, like sometimes I just write down a word,
Mhm.
like I got pretty angry Tuesday, um, which is a couple days ago from when we're recording this. And
Yeah.
when I got angry, there was a catalyst, and I wrote it down in my notebook. Um, but but all I did was I wrote down the keyword of what really frustrated with me because I remember it. I don't have to write down everything, but I do want to write down like the trigger, the emotions that I'm feeling. Where do I feel it at? Like, are my palms sweating? Do I feel it in my shoulders? Is my heart racing? Like these
I'm
kinds of
trying to
things.
remember whether or not we talked on Tuesday. That's all I'm thinking.
No. Well, we did. I think I told you, I was like, I can't talk right now. Like, I think that was like the conversation where I was like, dude, I'm not having a good day, not in a good headspace.
Okay.
Um, but writing down that, and then, but the other thing to realize is if you get to the end of the day and you haven't wrote anything down, probably means if you're in the habit of writing down the causes of anxiety in your life and you didn't write anything down, maybe you didn't have anxiety, like you didn't realize you didn't recognize it that day.
Yeah.
So maybe what we can do is we can think about that day and think about what we did maybe to keep us from seeing that, right?
Yeah. One of the things that reminds me so closely of is, do you know who Rob Geardeck is? From
Yeah.
like Robin Big and
Yeah,
MTV,
yeah.
skateboarder and ridiculousness. I watched an interview with him one time, and he like basically kind of the same thing. He does like a grade card for every day.
Mhm.
Have you heard this?
No.
So he gets done with his day, and he, A, B, C, D, E, F, the regular grading scale, and he just he writes down what he thought about that day in terms of a grade. So an A is, A plus is a great day, obviously, and the same thing in school. But then he writes down like if he's had a really, really good day or a really, really bad day, or I think he does it probably for any day in general, but he tries to write down bullet points of like what he did that day. And
Yeah.
so what he tries to do is he says that it's kind of a mundane practice if you only do it once, but he said over the course of like a year, you can really start to see some patterns like, man, on these great days, I was doing these five things.
Yeah.
And maybe it was I got a chance to, for me, it's like I got a chance to get out of the office and go play some basketball. That was a great day, right? Or maybe for him, it's like you know, I felt really good because I made 10 business calls that day, and that furthered my business. I felt really good about myself. And then he says once he develops a pattern for what makes up a great day, he just tries to do that stuff every day so that every day is a great day. Now, you're not going to
You
have every day be a great day, but I thought it was kind of a brilliant idea. Like when we were talking about self awareness, like realizing patterns in yourself. Like,
yeah.
why am I having such a bad day today? Oh, it's because I, ate McDonald's and had 14 McChickens yesterday. And today I feel pretty
That
bad,
sounds so good though. That sounds
dude.
amazing.
Ah, dude,
Just
I love it,
just
but it's
yeah.
horrible.
You
But
you
it's just,
cannot
it's an interesting exercise,
you cannot improve what isn't measured. And I'm telling you, just by journaling and reflecting on your day, giving yourself a letter grade, or um, one of my business coach kind of pointed me into like a number scale thing, and he was like,
Mhm.
he was like, give yourself a number grade 1 to 7, but you cannot pick 5. And I was like,
Interesting.
I'm gonna change this a little bit because like I either want to give myself a 0 or a 1. Like, it was a good day or it wasn't. Like, and
Yeah.
I'm sometimes I get a little bit, like, a default aggressive in that sense. Like, the scale thing just doesn't work in my brain. Like, was it good or was it bad? And so
Yeah.
a lot like and actually you can't really see, but up there there is two oh, there's my little thumb that some there's two little mason jars and they have marbles in it. And each marble, like each there's seven marbles total in those jars. And
Okay.
each day when I leave the office, I move a jar from the bad day jar to the good day jar if it's a good day. And if it's a bad day, I move it from the good day jar to the bad day jar.
You mean a
And
marble to the
a marble.
okay.
Yep. So that's my system. And so like every day when I leave the office, was it a good day? Or was it a bad day? And if I some days I come in and I had a good day and there's no marbles in the bad jar, meaning I'm having like my eighth day in a row be a good day. Right.
Yeah.
And if I leave here and I decided it was a bad day, it was a zero, then I take a jar out of the good day and put it back in the bad day. Right. So that's like
A
it's on my
marble.
way
Yeah.
out. That's something I do. But I want to jump into something kind of
That's kind of
and
cool.
and so here's the thing. All right. Whatever we're focused on, we have a choice. We talked about this a little bit last week in the 10 lies episode. Um, the notion that there's kind of two sides to everything in life, right? Two sides to a piece of bread. There's a
Yeah.
positive and negative. There's a north and south. There's an up and down. The old saying, like, you pick up a stick, there's two sides.
Yeah.
Or you pick up one side of a stick, you pick up the other side too, kind of thing. So whatever we're looking at, like, take client, emergency room doctor, good income, he feels behind. It's like, what are you focused on that makes you feel behind?
Yeah.
Probably, and
That's a
in
good
his story,
question.
he's already telling me that like, he left the fraternity house to go to med school, and a bunch of his other buddies are going off and starting their careers.
Yeah.
He's falling prey to the rules of comparison, right? Like, he's comparing himself to someone else. He's looking at their circumstance, not his own, and he's choosing out of the positive and negative side of things. He's choosing to focus on the negative. So I compare myself to my old, I was not in a fraternity, uh,
Yeah.
unless you call the army a fraternity.
Yeah.
But he's looking back and he's like, of my fraternity brothers, I'm behind them because they had this. Instead of saying, looking back at my fraternity brothers and they're doing this, this, and this, and they're like stressed out working, 90 hours a week or whatever the case may be. And, their
Yeah.
income's here and they're kind of capped out. And I'm, starting my career as a medical doctor, getting to save lives. I've saved lives and I get compensated well. My job security is huge. Um, he can choose which the positive or negative side. And so sometimes if we start to feel anxious, the first thing that I do is like, okay, what's making me anxious? I'm probably thinking about the negative side. So what would be the opposite? And is there a way
Yeah.
for me to change? So here's what happens. Okay. And this, like, I want to really tie this into that fight or flight mentality. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're like, I'm giving you an example, but this is science. All right.
Sure.
We have our eyes fixated on a fact, right? Fact can be
Okay.
positive or negative. And in that
Yes.
positive or negative fact, my eyes, right, my focus determines my belief, the faith in my head in this. So focus determines my faith, right? Focus
Okay.
determines how I think about things. Um,
Okay.
Once it's in my head, the thoughts in my brain determine the feelings inside of me, right? So in this case, like, so focus leads to faith, faith leads to feelings, right?
Okay.
And if my feelings are fear, then it stays bottled up in fear, fight or flight. Like, a lot of times fear causes us to freeze, right?
Sure.
So a lot of times, if you're thinking about all this stuff and like, oh man, like, there's a way to trace it back to how I feel, but how do we overcome fear? Another way that we can do it is we can trace it, from our actions. So, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, if we're focused on something and it's negative and it's causing any thoughts in our head, it's causing anxiousness inside of us, and it's causing kind of like fear driven paralysis. Like, I can't come to a decision. I don't know. I'm just nervous. I'm just scared. That causes us to freeze. So, in the same time that I'm feeling anxious, my next question is, what am I doing? Like, what action am I taking right now? And if I'm
Yeah.
not taking any action, that means that the anxiety is actually causing like paralysis, right?
Yeah.
Financial paralysis. And so what I do is my next question is what actions can I take? Because you're the what we do, the function of doing can trump the feelings that we feel. So
Yeah.
so if
Oftentimes
I
it does.
s- so if I get scared, nervous, anxious, whatever thing that causes those chemicals to cause me to like freeze up and get really like I start questioning, I start doubting, I start wondering, I'm like I'm probably going to make a mistake here, right?
Yeah.
But to your point, like what can I do? Like sometimes it's like the smallest thing. Like I'm going to just call Bill
Yeah.
and have a conversation with him. Like that's doing. And if I start to function overrides feeling, right?
Yeah.
And if I start to override that feeling, that creates a clarity in my head. So now I can change my focus from negative to positive. So
Yeah.
some like a lot of times if we're feeling anxious, it's our focus determining our body.
Yeah.
And to combat that, a lot of times it's let's start with function to overpower the feeling, and that will help us change our focus. So
Yeah.
that might be really confusing. I hope that makes sense.
No, the entire time we were talking about this, and I'm actually pretty pumped you brought this up because like one of the best pieces of advice my father ever gave me, and he's full of great advice. But I was in college, and this isn't financial, but it's that overwhelming feeling of like, I have all these things to do. What do I do? And, I think if I remember correctly, it was about like finals and like which one to study for. And then I had to focus on moving after finals. Like I just had a lot of stuff in college going on. And I talked to my dad and and he said, "How you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm like, I don't get overwhelmed that much because I'm a pretty good planner and I can prioritize my time okay." I said, "But I just feel completely overwhelmed right now. Like I don't know that I can get all of this done in the time that I need to get it done. And I'm not really sure where to start. Like, I don't know where to start to make sure everything fits in." And he just said, just start. He said, just pick one, even if your first inclination is, that's not the priority, if you will. He said, just start somewhere. And then typically the priority totally, did you draw that?
Yeah,
Nice. But
I didn't mean
he's,
to cut you off.
no, it's all good. I'm excited for this, but basically, the priorities work themselves out. If you can take if in terms of personal finance too, like if hey, I've got five really good decisions that I know are good to do with money, but I'm not sure which one to do first. Like, just do the smallest one that moves the needle, even an increment, and then
Yeah.
the priorities tend to take care of themselves. So, what is going on here? I am so excited for this.
So
Okay,
this is exactly what we were saying, right? Like
is this Timmy? Who is this?
our eyes see a fact, and we
Yeah.
choose to focus to the positive or negative side, right? We're
Okay.
human beings. Typically, we
Yeah.
find the negative in things. Human beings are naturally good at that. We have to practice finding
Sure.
positive things, you know. So, but with the focus, right, driving the thoughts in our head, if we're focused on negative things, it drives doubt. If we focus on the positive things, it cultivates faith in the outcome, right? But when we have these thoughts and we internalize them, it comes down into our body, right? Into our heart. And this is where
Yeah.
we start to feel everything going on inside of our head, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes getting it out of our head and just writing it down on paper doesn't allow it to move down into our body, right? So sometimes that's
Yeah.
an easy fix. But once it gets inside of us, it drives feelings, one of which can be anxiety. Another, what if there's like positive, negative, two sides. So if I can feel anxious about something, I can feel confident about the same thing,
Sure.
right? So if that's true, then let me change my focus. But
Yeah.
sometimes we get so amped up. Like once it's in here, it's so hard to change what's up here in our head. Once it's in
Yeah.
our heart, it's hard to change what's in our head. So
Yeah.
how do we overcome feelings is to start functioning, doing with our hand, right? So to your
Yep.
point, it can be the smallest thing. If I'm starting to feel anxious, like I'm committed to going to the gym, right?
Yeah.
The past 10 days of my life have been wildly busy, and that has been something that I've had it's been a struggle, and to be honest, I haven't been to the gym every day,
Yeah.
right?
Sure.
And that starts creating like this sense of like, oh, I'm failing, I'm letting myself down, I'm not sticking to my obligation. So what do I do? Right? I instead of internalizing those feelings like I'm a failure, this isn't gonna I knew this was I'm not, instead of that, I'm just like, hey, I'm gonna go do something small. I'm gonna
Yeah.
go knock out 10 push-ups and walk my dog. I'm gonna go,
Yeah.
just
Awesome.
do some chores around the house real quick before I go lay down. Whatever the
Yeah.
case may be, it's the little function that I can start doing that will put me back in control. So
Yeah.
confidence trumps anxiety, or is the opposite of anxiety. They can't totally exist. Sometimes there's like this push pull back and forth of confidence and
Yeah.
anxiety, right? But eventually, if the more function we have in our hand, the more confidence creeps in and pushes anxiety out. That changes the doubt to faith. So it can kind of go from hands to fact, but oftentimes we let it go from facts to inside of us. So
Yeah. And I
hopefully
think
that's
it's
a pretty helpful diagram there. If you're watching, if
it
you're
is like
listening on podcast, go
it's
check
like
out
I'm
the YouTube video.
it's like I'm watching Picasso right in front of me. It's
I'm an
amazing. But
artist.
yeah.
Check out
And
Harpeth Wealth on Instagram. You'll see all my drawings.
there you
That's
go.
pretty they're pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
You
But
got anything else? Oh, keep going then.
yeah, I just think that that's such a good point. I mean, it takes me back to, I've heard like therapists on TV and people, and I think, Jordan Peterson also, who I quote, you know, out of obligation on every single podcast. I'll be right back. Um, but they say the smallest thing, like if you're feeling down and out or, lacking confidence or something like that, like just stand up with your shoulders straight
Mm,
and your head up
Power
and
man
your
pose or
shoulders
Superman
bent,
pose.
or
Yeah.
and like look up instead of like look up and put your shoulders back. And it's like, yes, all those things are connected, and some people believe that you can actually override that, if you're to that point where all the feelings are inside. That's why action can actually change your attitude and physiology sometimes, is what
Yes.
they say. So
Function overpowers feelings.
yeah, so
And
not a whole lot about super in-depth money things today, but just
well, I
some
think
good advice overall
yeah.
in terms of physiology and how we think about the world, and money is such a big part of that. And
I
it's we often say the biggest part of dealing, helping people is figuring out about them, how they function and how they think about money and how they look
mhm.
at it. And that determines a lot of the success that we have with our clients.
I think yeah, I think we did. So just to recap, like I think most people listening can kind of fit into one of three categories of people. I don't have enough and I'm anxious about it. I I've kind of become who I wanted to be and I feel behind and I'm anxious about it. Or I have enough and I'm really afraid I'm going to mess it up or lose it and I'm
Yeah.
anxious about it. People carry anxiety, and sometimes we've been carrying that since before we've been born. Um the phrase that I have for like what I do with people is I call it the undoing or the unlearning project. And sometimes like the first few meetings when I sit down with a client, that is the hardest work we will do together, is just trying to help both me and the client understand how much we have to unlearn. One of the clients came in like, I'm really really big on kind of a abundance mindset with my clients. So one of my clients came in, I was like, how much do you think you're spending? Oh, I'm spending about this much money. I was like, okay, we're gonna check on that. So let's do a little bit of an audit. Found out she was spending about like 135% of the money she thought she was spending. And she was like, kind of in freak out mode. She's like, I need to cut back. And I was like, no, you don't need to cut back at all. We need to earn more money. Like I don't want you to think about it. Now, let me be very clear. There are absolutely times like emergency, like parachute reserves. Like I'm going to pull the ripcord on my reserve. There's times we need to button up, right?
Yeah.
But
I need another yacht. Yeah.
the default mindset of like I have to eliminate the things I need to fit, like that's scarcity. Like no,
Hmm.
you can just like you're worth way more. You're worth so much more, and I don't want you to like stop giving yourself the things you need. Let's start
Yeah.
thinking about how we earn more money. And I would bet the outcome. There's a guy that I like love to have him on at some point, but his big thing is it's easier to make $1 million in a day than it is to make $1 million in a year. And and
Hmm.
it's this whole thing. We could probably talk on an episode about that in and of itself. But the
I think
point
that's our
being,
next podcast right there.
the point being is, you know, we have people deal with this anxiety in life around finances their whole life, and undoing that is hard work, right? Also, just a quick note, like there's legit like medical issues that make some people more susceptible to anxiety, and
Yeah.
all brains work very, very different. And sometimes it takes like going and seeing a professional, it takes medication, it takes these things. And but the whole point of medication typically is to create space for our body to like reset to a normal place. And then a lot of
Right.
times the goal is to taper off medication once we get the therapy we need, right? So
Right.
understand, like I'm not trumping a doctor, and no, I don't think a journal is going to replace medication tomorrow. But I would bet if you're in a professional like relationship and somebody's helping you overcome anxiety, they're probably asking you to journal anyway, right? Um, the
Probably.
point of all that is though, is I think the couple key point takeaways is write down what triggers us, write down where we feel it, try to trace it back to its roots. Awareness is very, very impactful, right? I think of like I've been watching the show Louder Milk, and it's about an Alcoholics Anonymous group.
We just started that too. It's
It's great.
awesome.
But
I love that
I
show.
was actually I had a client come in and I was kind of saying that like even once we get good at managing this, like every time you kind of have to come to a meeting and say like, "Hi, I'm Brandon, and I'm a financial anxious holic," you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
like because we're always susceptible to relapsing into this behavior because we're just good at it. We've been doing it for our whole life. And so
Mhm.
the point is awareness of where it comes from and how to treat it in our own way is paramount. Having the right relationships in our life so we can take action or be held accountable to take action when otherwise we'd want to just freeze up, right? And then that's the last thing is almost have like an emergency list of things to do, right? So if
Yeah.
I am just feeling overwhelmed, I don't have to think about what I'm going to do. I'm just going to grab my like emergency list, and I'm
Yeah.
going to like if I get overwhelmed, I'm going to go for a run, drink a bunch of water, call and talk to Bill, pray about it. Like whatever my emergency reaction list is, that is what I'm going to do. Right? If a pilot is flying a plane and the plane starts to go down, he has a list and he doesn't have to think about what he's going to do. He's going to pull out this list and he's going to start doing the things on the list because his heart rate has probably jumped to 220 beats per minute because his plane is going down. But he is going to execute that emergency list because he has it. And that's what we need to do. I want everybody listening to go and make a list. And maybe it doesn't work the first time. We'll refine it, but I want you to make a list of things you're like, hey, if I start feeling overwhelmed, I'm going to do this. And then one of those things on the list needs to be call, Heart with Wealth Partners and get a financial plan. So, what
Exactly.
else you got? Can we wrap it up?
No, I think we wrap it up. Just everybody do the next right thing out there and get a coach in your corner, get somebody you trust, and good people around you. Follow us on where should they follow us, Brandon? YouTube, Amazon,
Yeah, we love
uh,
YouTube views. We love
podcasts,
Spotify
everywhere.
and Apple podcast followers and subscribers. We like reviews and ratings on those things. We also
Yeah.
have Harp with Wealth Partners has that's I run that, so I do all the little sketches that you'll see on there. So if you check that out on Instagram or Facebook, you'll see a whole bunch of just really simple sketches that try to you know sum up like a pretty complex thought in this very, very simple way, just to keep you thinking.
Yeah.
um, and then, you're more than welcome to connect with me, Brandon, LinkedIn or Facebook or anywhere else like that too. Um,
Yeah.
Reach out.
harpethwealthpartners.com, and we'll see
Yeah.
y'all next week.
Check the show notes. Our emails are down there too. Shoot us an email if you got a show question, idea, whatever. We'll get it up. Later, Bill.
See you, man.
We hope you learned something valuable today. We appreciate you including us in your journey towards financial betterment.
It is important to us that you know this is for educational purposes only and not to be considered specific advice for any individual listener. If something we discussed is relevant to you and you have questions about how it might be uniquely applicable to you, please discuss that with a financial professional, or, of course, we are happy to have further conversations with you about your specific questions, needs, or circumstances. We welcome you to reach out to us via our website, harpethwealthpartners.com, or by emailing Brandon at bmc@harpethwealthpartners.com. Securities are offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice is offered through Private Advisor Group, a registered investment advisor. Private Advisor Group and Harpeth Wealth Partners are separate entities from LPL Financial. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not to be intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult appropriate qualified professionals prior to making a decision. Investing includes risk, including fluctuating prices and loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Hypothetical examples presented are not representative of any specific investments. Your results may vary. We want to thank you for your time, and we look forward to having you back next week.